Russia gangs up with bad boys. Venezuela's President Maduro is turning to the USA away from Russia. South Korea is sending unexpected gifts to its northern neighbor. North Korea continues behaving badly. Iran's domestic political war intensifies. China pledges to protect Kazakhstan from Russia. Sri Lankans come to Moscow and boy, they are furious. Chinese company buys world's most expensive rocks from Russian crooks. Trump and Biden debate to the amusement of the entire world. And the biggest news of the week, Turkey snubs Russia. Again. Howdy, friends. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. Every Wednesday, I give you my takes on important world news that you will not find anywhere. Before we jump to the first news, here is a little joke for you, as usual. Only today it's not really a joke. Well, decide for yourself what it is. The results of 24 years of promises by the Russian president are, well, back in the 2000, it all started with the promises of affordable housing for every Russian. And 24 years later, in 2024, the promises have come down to affordable food for every Russian. Let's start with something from the United Nations today. Russia once again became the chairman of the United Nations Security Council for a month. It happens once so often, but this time Russia is giving this organization, the UN Security Council, it's leading the Security Council with new friends behind it. Russians' friends, Somalians, the Houthis. The North Koreans, close friends and documented close military allies now. Russia's friends, the Taliban. Russia's friends, the Iranians. If you want to know what's falling into the abyss means, well, this is it. Having friends like that. And I'm pretty sure that the whole world is feeling completely safe and secure with Russia and its new friends at the helm of the UN Security Council. But you know what? At least I have positive news to offset this disturbing news. Russia is losing a friend right now. And the news comes from Venezuela. The news comes from Venezuela. Venezuela is resuming direct talks with the United States on restoring relations between the two countries. And the president of the Bolivarian Republic, Nicolás Maduro, said that on the program of the Venezuela, the Television TV channel, a program called With Maduro Plus. Oh, let me show you what he said.
De Diálogo Nacional, Héctor Rodríguez Castro, representarán a Venezuela en esos diálogos y vamos a debatir y a buscar nuevos acuerdos para que se cumpla lo firmado en Qatar. Quiero diálogo, quiero entendimiento, quiero futuro para nuestras relaciones, quiero cambios, eso sí, bajo la soberanía absoluta y la independencia de Venezuela.
I actually believe in this time. I find Maduro a very sly person. He's held the absolute power in Venezuela by using Russia's support. You know, he's been at the helm of the country since 2013. I hope you remember the rhetoric Maduro had towards the USA a few years ago. absolute evil, the enemies, the worst country in the world. And he did that because he had Russia's support. Now, Russia isn't supporting Venezuela. It simply can't. And it's become a pariah, something of itself. What the point of for Maduro to be allied with Russia these days? No point. Who's the new ally? Old good the USA, obviously. And now we are seeing that the process is just about to begin. Big changes for Venezuela are coming, and it's about time. Let's jump to the next news. Yulia Navalnaya was just elected the head of the Foundation for the Protection of Human Rights. I quote Yulia, "As someone who has personally witnessed the threat that dictatorships pose to our loved ones and the world at large, it is a great honor for me to assume the role of the chairman of the Human Rights Foundation. In these difficult times, the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms is more important than ever. The Human Rights Foundation mission is close to my heart, and I look forward to this opportunity to help promote it." You know, I am very skeptical of Yulia Navalnaya, the politician. Her husband is a legend and inspiration to all of us, inside and outside Russia. But Yulia, I never heard of her. The first time I heard was when her husband was arrested. And that's because they came to Russia together and she was also in the news. And now she's trying to continue the cause of her late husband. I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to give her a chance as people change and grow. Time will tell. The next news is also from, one of the bad boys. That bad boy is North Korea. The rumors have it that North Korea has successfully tested a new missile called, forgive me for pronunciation, Hwansong 11DA-4.5 tactical ballistic missile. I'm saying rumors because the reports are coming from the Central Telegraph Agency of North Korea. You know, I always take that central agency news, whatever they say, with a huge grain of salt, and I recommend you do too. It is reported that the new missile is capable of carrying an ultra-large warhead weighing up to 4.5 tons. That's a big question. How the country that supplies Russia with corroded rounds of ammunition that the USSR supplied it some 40 years ago, that North Korea, the country that begs Putin for missile technologies, and it just happened a week ago when Putin was visiting North Korea, how can it successfully build ballistic missiles? Why do they need Russian technologies then? Something doesn't make any sense, you know? What do you think? Is North Korea for real with its missiles or it's bluffing? Please share your opinions down below in the comments. Right there. I would love to see them, read them, and hear them. The next news comes from, South Korea this time. The news is that the South Korea is sending presents to North Korea. Let me remind you, in the last 2 months, North Korea launched more than 1,000 large balloons with garbage and manure to spread all over South Korea. And the South Koreans are striking back. And this is how. Last night, the balloons carrying about 300,000 leaflets, a few thousand American dollars in $1 bills, and USB computer flash drives with popular pop music and TV shows were launched across the border in the South Korean town of Paiju. The North Koreans are sending trash and manure, and the Southern Koreans are sending gifts and money. I think it's pretty easy to say who's decent and who's not. But, this trash, manure sending and gift sending situation within North and South Korea reminded me a story that happened to me personally in 1987. There was a warming of relations between the USA and the USSR, and one of the results of that warming was, the perestroika, glasnost, that type of thing. So one of the results was an American exhibition called «Информатика в жизни США». And it translates something as the digital technologies in the life of America. It, came to Rostov-on-Don, and my dad took me to visit. We stood in line for like 3 hours. Such a huge line to get in, but hey, we were Soviet people at the time, and we were hardened by lines, so it's 3 hours, no big deal, just a warm-up. So, and we got in, and it was one of the most profound effects on me when I was growing up. What I saw on that day changed my life, but that's another story, okay? When exiting, every one of us, every visitor, was given a gift, free of charge. A gift like I had never seen before. This is what we were given. I found a picture of it. A plastic bag with a Pepsi logo on it, a magazine in Russian, and a pin. A pin! Simple, cheap stuff. I was shaken as that something that stuff was made in America. I always considered America something like Mars, and the Martians came to my city, to my neighborhood, and they showed us their latest technology, the computers, something I hadn't even seen on Soviet TV before, some concept so brand new. And when we were leaving, they gave us gifts. Again, that was cheap, non-important stuff, but it made me feel so freaking special. I was 11 years old, and I remember hanging on to that snow white plastic bag and reading through the magazine, and I took it to school, and I was feeling special. And I take it that the North Koreans who got the gifts from the balloons that, fell on their property, their land, and kept them, I take it that they're feeling somewhat like I was feeling back then in 1987. And I know the feeling, and it's a very good feeling. And every time I think of it, it makes me smile. Before I jump to the next news, I want to thank you. Those of you who bought me coffees at buymecoffee.com. Your support shows that you value my work highly and high enough to support me and buy me coffee. And that's very inspirational and satisfying. Big thank you. The next news is a bit of odd, and it comes from Iran. A scandal broke out in Iran. As you know, Iran is having a presidential race right now because the old president died in a helicopter crash a few weeks ago. And right now, the presidential election is coming up. So they're fighting. There's a huge power struggle in Iran. And Iranian reformist presidential candidate named don't quote me on that, Pazeshkian. This is the guy with his bodyguards around him. That's mean, nasty looking bodyguards, by the way. Oh, I personally wouldn't want to vote for the guy with bodyguards like that. But anyway, this candidate compared General Soleimani, one of Iranian's leaders who was killed by an American missile attack. So he compared General Soleimani to a hair in his nose that caused irritation. Now, Soleimani is widely considered a hero in Iran for reasons Iranians know, I don't know. But he's one of the icons. And this fella comes out and says that Soleimani is a hair in his nose. I don't really know what it's all about, but I really, really like it. I like when top politicians in Iran fight, especially like that. It proves their interests lie not with the country or with the people of Iran, but with their own interests. Good old spiders in the jar. Oh yeah. The next news comes from China. A very important statement was made by the Chinese President Xi. I was kind of thinking of making that the biggest news of today's live stream, but hear me out. Xi said that China has consistently supported Kazakhstan's efforts to protect national independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And then China is supporting Kazakhstan for that. He also noted that Beijing opposes hegemonism, the policy of force and bloc confrontation, and is ready to promote an equal multipolarity of the world. Now, I'll try to break it down for you, okay? The only country that poses a threat to Kazakhstan right now, to Kazakhstan's integrity, sovereignty, that's Russia. Russia, well, first of all, it's northern neighbor of Kazakhstan, used to be a part of one country, and Russian politicians have said multiple times, there have been leaks, that the decision to annex Kazakhstan has already been made, and it's just a matter of time. People of Kazakhstan are very scared and very worried about that, and now Chinese are coming to the rescue. And that statement is clearly against Russia. Wow, that was a very strong anti-Russian statement by China. So, my dear Russians, do you still think that China is your dear friend and ally? Well, it's your worst enemy. Oh well, that's for me and us to know, and for you, those who are still inside Russia, to find out. And the next news comes from Sri Lanka. Do you even know where Sri Lanka is? I actually do. And you know why? Because some of Russian refugees moved to Sri Lanka and residing there. Actually, quite a few. One of the members of Tashkent Breakfast Club, the guy who started attending breakfasts here in Tashkent, his family moved from Russia, and then they moved to Sri Lanka. They live in there. So anyway, I know the place. I actually even plan on visiting it. Sri Lanka has sent a mission to Moscow. This news is about the official government visit of Sri Lanka, its foreign minister Taraka Balasuria, to Moscow. Do you know what's interesting here? Sri Lanka is a small, tiny country, important? I don't know. Incredibly interesting, incredibly important. And it shows you the true face of Russian propaganda. You see, I did not learn of this news from any Russian media or Russian Foreign Ministry office. No. Complete silence. As if this visit never took place, and it just happened a couple days ago. Russians need not know. I learned of the visit from Sri Lankan embassy and from Sri Lankan media, because Sri Lankan officials came to Moscow with a scandal. They demanded compensation from Russia for the citizens of the country sent to the war in Ukraine and killed. Let me show you folks from Sri Lanka. This is the picture, the only picture of the official visit. And, you know, see, it's not like official high quality, high resolution. That's someone must have taken on a cell phone. The Sri Lankan delegation demanded compensation from Russian authorities to the families of the Lankans killed and wounded in the war with Ukraine. The embassy of the Asian country in Moscow reported. Again, not Russian propaganda, not Russian media. That, Sri Lankan embassy reported. Look at them, Sri Lankans. They aren't looking happy. And why is there a Russian general? Really, it's a Ministry of Foreign Affairs meeting, right? Well, it was a rhetorical question. We all understand why he is there. According to the diplomatic mission, the delegation was in Russia on June 26-27 and held meetings with Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko, as well as Deputy Defense Minister Colonel General Alexander Fomin. The talks focused on 17 Lankans killed in the war, compensation payments to the families of the dead and the wounded, and the search for missing persons, as well as the early termination of contracts of the recruited Sri Lankan citizens and payment of the rewards. The Russian Foreign Ministry has been keeping very silent about that. You know what? You can hide the truth, but it always comes out at the end. Before I jump to the next news, I'd like to remind you that every single day I carefully select 9 news from Russia that I find important and make them available to the patrons of Inside Russia. So if you want to receive daily updates on 9 news that I find important, like big accidents, new laws, arrests, political changes in political landscape, prices, economic news, you name it. Everything I find important, become channel's patron at patreon.com. I'm going to leave links down below in the pinned comment and in the description to this live stream. The next news comes from Bolivia. Bolivian President Luis Arce thwarted an apparent attempted coup on last Wednesday, a week ago. As Army General Juan Jose Zuniga was arrested hours after he fled he ordered troops and tanks to storm the presidential palace in the capital, La Paz. Check this out. This is what happened in Bolivia. I remember it actually was happening as I was making World News Update last week on Wednesday. I take it they're moving on to the presidential palace. There was no violence, no blood. There was a coup attempt. Well, President Arce from the left-wing Movement for Socialism party has hailed the failed coup, calling it a victory for Bolivians and Bolivian democracy. Well, this news is interesting to me because I draw parallels to Russia. I'm sure that the most dangerous force for Putin in Russia right now is Russian armed forces and the generals. And the worse things get in the army, the angrier the generals get, the more dangerous it becomes for Vladimir Putin. Look at Bolivia. It wasn't the people who tried to stage the coup, it was the general and his troops. Well, I guarantee you, I will keep on watching. And if something like that in Russia starts happening, you will be the first to know. The next news comes from China. A little accident recently happened in one of our Chinese cities. Or perhaps a big accident. This video caught my attention, this news caught my attention for one simple reason. It shows how densely populated the Chinese cities are and the conditions of living there. As I'm looking at this, this picture, this video, this place reminds me of Anthill. It's actually even worse than Moscow. Although I see that Chinese are trying to include some kind of a greenery in their lives, that doesn't really happen in Moscow. Look, they're trying to plant grass, bushes, perhaps trees on every single piece of land possible. Well, another interesting thing is that there was a pretty big accident, and it happened because of heavy rains and water, Russian water, caused the damage, and this whole tunnel collapsed. And this collapse was fixed in around 3 days in China. In Russia, it would take 3 years to fix a collapse like that. Hey, I'm being too pessimistic here, all right? I gotta be more precise, more optimistic. 2. It would take 2 years to fix that in Russia, not 3. The next news comes from the Chinese corporation Wuhan Zhongda Group. A strange accident happened to it and an investigation has been launched. It purchased 2,000 tons of pure copper in Russia from a Russian company, but the copper mysteriously disappeared. All 2,000 tons of it. A Russian metallurgical company sold about $20 million. Oh, yes, that's about right. 2,000 tons, $20 million worth of copper. That's a lot of money. So the Chinese paid for it, and they received the cargo. And when they opened up, I guess there was a train trucks. So they found not copper, but granite rocks. Granite rocks arrived instead of copper. And the granite rocks isn't exactly what the Chinese ordered, and the granite rocks are way cheaper than copper, well, a lot cheaper than copper. The representatives of the Chinese corporation went to the metallurgical plant in Russia to investigate. But it turned out there's no such metallurgical plant exists in Russia. Not even on paper. All documents were fake, and Russian authorities, including the federal police, are simply shrugging their shoulders and pretty much not doing anything. Things happen, they say. It's Russia. The Chinese are shocked. I'm not, because I've seen it happen before. In the 90s, it happened left and right. Only the amounts were much smaller. I never heard of $20 million back then. Well, I tell you what, the Russians, I'm not the only one who would remember similar situations. Everyone who went through the 90s in Russia, when there was a huge transformation from one country to another, and the values were completely changed overnight to the opposite. And I talked about it before. So everyone who went through the 90s remembers situations like that. Well, Russians wanted to go back to the USSR, and they're there now. And the Chinese are too. The next news comes from Canada. And let me tell you something. Canada has imposed sanctions against Russian hockey player, and a lot of you might recognize his face, Vladislav Tretiak. The Canadians especially must remember him. Russia's most famous goaltender, one of the best goalies ice hockey has ever seen. Perhaps the best, the legend. Former representative, first of all, he's a former ice hockey player and the foundation of Soviet victories in the 70s and in the 80s. He is a member of a famous Red Army 5, the Red Army machine. He's also former representative of a Canadian company called Ski-Doo. He lived and trained professionals in NHL, both in Canada and in the USA. And, he's seen it all. He has many friends in Canada, in the USA, and he's a part of a hockey brotherhood, The legends, he's one of them. So this guy is not naive, and he's not uninformed. And yet, he's a Russian senator now and a sports bureaucrat. And he's become a Z person, supporting Putin unconditionally, supporting war in Ukraine unconditionally, supporting what Russia is doing to Ukraine, and the changes and the transformations that are happening in the Russian society. He's one of the top Russian leadership now behind this incredible tragedy. And Canada has done what's right, imposing the sanctions. And this is just one sad episode in a very sad demise of my country, Russia. And the next news comes from Georgia, the country, not the state. I remind you that the Georgian parliament, the controlling political party called Georgian Dream, which is pro-Russian, it passed the law on foreign agents recently. The Georgians are calling this law the Russian law, and for a good reason. In Russia, the very same law was the first step on taking away personal freedoms from Russian citizens. It was the first step for Russia, and this is the first step for Georgia. And the Georgian pro-Russian parliament isn't going to stop, This is just the beginning. It's considering a new package of bills with primary goal to ban what it is calling LGBT propaganda. I've heard that before. I've heard that music, I've been there, I've seen that. That what happened in Russia, it was the second step after the foreign agent law was created in Russia. Then they switched to LGBT so-called propaganda in Russia. And it looks like it'll be in Georgia, the very same scenario. Georgian parliament doesn't need to create anything new. It simply is following KGB's guidelines. I recently ran into a set of old pictures taken in the late 80s in Georgia when the times were really tough for all of us in the USSR and for Georgians as well. And I want to show them to you because it's exactly where Georgia is going. That's exactly where it's coming back to. Let's take a look at the pictures. I'm not going to comment on them. Just, take a look. My bet this is 1990, perhaps 1989. This particular photo is, you know, touched me more than others. It's older people sitting eating bread. And that's how I remember. That was a very common sight in the USSR. We didn't have much to eat. There was basic stuff: bread, water, tea. We always had tea somehow. You know, it was not your English tea. It was crap, but it was tea. We could drink it. And this is how I remember, you know, what was happening in my childhood too. This is a very... And another picture I would like to show as well. You know, it's basically old women, babushkas, are standing in line to get water, because in many places we did not have running water. So we had to take buckets, go outside and, you know, fill a bucket up. Usually it's a big one, and it weighed a lot. And then bring it back and use it for water. And I remember we had running water where I lived in my apartment. My parents, we had a newer one. But my grandma and grandpa, when they moved to the city, they lived in a house, a very old house, with no water. No sewage, no water, just electricity, that's all. And that was one of my responsibilities, to keep the house stocked with water. No, I loved it, as this big hydrant of water was right next to our house. So I'd take a bucket and fill it up and bring it. So I remember that very well. And you know what's sad? Again, it's okay. It's my past. It's our past. But I can't even imagine it's being the future. I've been to Georgia. It's a wonderful country, and I hope it stays wonderful. I hope it doesn't completely fall under the control of Russia. If it does... The next news is major, and it comes from America. I could not touch it, so to speak. The debates between Donald Trump and Joseph Biden. I won't talk much about it. You most likely saw the debates by yourself. Everyone I talked to saw them. And all I gotta say is that I try to stay away from American politics. I'm not an expert in American politics, and I'm not an American citizen, so I will not discuss the debates. But what I will tell you is the reaction of people here in Uzbekistan, both Russians and Uzbeks, and the reaction of people in many other countries that I've personally spoken to in these few days. Now, folks, half of people are laughing, and another half are very, very concerned, because America is a powerful country, the trendsetter and the major influencer. It's a huge force. And if American leadership is in such shape, that is very scary. Do you know what's funny? Leonid Brezhnev, the USSR Secretary General, the guy who everyone joked about his old age, inability to speak straight, inability to walk straight, mumbling, etc. When he died, he was younger than Joseph Biden when Biden became the US president. Ain't it funny? I wish America a good leader. A leader that both Democrats and Republicans and everyone else, for that matter, can be proud of, saying, wow, we have such a great American president. Okay, before I jump to the last news, I'd like to ask you to write me 3 news you liked the most in the comments. I'm trying to improve constantly, and your feedback is hugely important. So thank you. And please like the video too. And if you didn't like anything or didn't like 3 news, just write me something nice in the comments. Say, Konstantin, thank you, you're doing a good job. It makes me feel very good. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The last news and the most important news of the week, that news comes from Kazakhstan. In my opinion, this news is huge. Well, that's what you learn if you watch Russian propaganda news. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Erdogan finally met during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Kazakhstan. They finally met. It's a big meeting. Whoa, finally, 2 big leaders meet, Check this out. This just happened minutes ago, by the way.
Saygıdeğer Cumhurbaşkanı, saygıdeğer mevkidaşlar, dostlar.
Now, Putin said that he and the Turkish president are in regular contact. I quote Vladimir Putin, "I am very glad to see you, Mr. President. We are in a regular contact with you. We exchange the views on the situation between our countries, the situation in the region, in the world as a whole on a regular basis. But we haven't seen each other for quite a long time, and I'm very glad to have our personal meeting," unquote. So propaganda has made it pretty darn big deal, and I'm pretty sure tomorrow is going to be blowing it out of proportion. So now, this is what happened in reality. Both Putin and Erdogan briefly met in the lobby of the hotel where both are staying, and I believe it's Ritz-Carlton, one day before the official summit begins tomorrow. Not the official meeting. Zilch of this information is in Russian news. And yes, Putin did say what I just quoted, and Erdogan was mostly silent. And see it one more time and pay a very close attention to body languages of both Putin and Erdogan, how they are handling themselves. That is very important. I want you to note that Erdogan doesn't look at Putin. Look, Putin tries to seek his eyes, but Erdogan is completely ignoring the guy. He's putting his hand and looking to the journalist and somebody else. Erdogan was not looking at Putin, let alone smiling or be nice to him. This meeting for Putin is a disaster. And this is the first time they met since September of last year, 2023. And yet Turkey is absolutely crucial for Russia now, for circumventing the international sanctions, selling Russian oil and natural gas, transiting oil and gas, and being a mediator between Russia and the world, and being a supplier of all the goods that Russia needs, products and services. And the Turkey was all of that until last year, when it started turning away from Russia towards the West and the USA. And now Turkey seems like the last straw Putin is trying to hang on to. And judging from this video, he's not succeeding. He does not have any more capable, real allies left. I'm not talking about friends, just allies. Countries who somewhat talk to Russia. Don't even look at China. China will understand where China is. It has its own role, and Russia is a vassal state for China. Definitely no partnership. So Turkey was more or less the last remaining country, and Putin had good personal relationship with Recep Erdogan. He saved Erdogan's life. If you remember, there was a military coup attempt in 2016, and Putin called Russian intelligence services called and warned Erdogan minutes before his place where he was staying on vacation was going to be raided. And so basically Putin saved Erdogan's life and power. And they were on friendly terms for a long time. And look at them now. Look at Erdogan now. Putin seeking for his attention and not getting it. To me, it's big. Big, big, big. It shows that Russia and Russian leadership need not rely on Turkey anymore. Need not to look at Turkey's side anymore, and that makes Russia's situation so much worse. That's it for the World News Update today. I suggest now you check out another video I made, the latest weekly Russian crazy news update that I release every Friday, and last Friday news update is right here. Please check it out. Carthago delenda est.